for example, in many cases, the boxing coach is seen as the only I suppose, stable and constant within these young people's lives. And because of the relationship that they're able to develop. And I think there's a psychological element to this as well, because I'm absolutely convinced that the reason why boxing clubs are great in terms of molding opinions and changing lives is that when you walk into a boxing gym, you're met with equal part excitement and equal part fear. And that puts you in a really, really good place psychologically. And we've got so many examples of where if a boxing coach tells you to do something, you do it.
From Coordinate Sports, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. Our guest this episode is Charlie Ford, Interim CEO of England Boxing. Charlie is currently leading on the implementation of England Boxing's new strategy and harnessing the potential of 23,000 boxer members and over 120,000 recreational members to build the reach of the sport and to make the most of boxing's record popularity. During the episode, we discuss his journey in sport administration and how he transitioned from a career in finance, the importance of officials and recruiting, training and retaining them to safeguard sport moving forward, as well as the key role boxing clubs play in the communities they serve. Enjoy the show. Okay, so I'm really excited to welcome Charlie Ford to the show today. He is currently interim CEO at England Boxing, the NGB that oversees more than 900 clubs and 17,000 members, with memberships increasing by 40% since 2017. So really excited to have you on today, Charlie. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. So we're just talking then off the recording about, I guess, network and all the people we've kind of known. So I guess we're going to get into that. But to get to know you a little bit better, we're going to try and go all the way back to childhood and ask you to describe how your childhood was.
Yeah, so we're going to hear trains, by the way, in the background. So I apologise for that. There's a train line just the other side of my house. But
it'll keep us on time.
So we will indeed, every 10 minutes. So I grew up in a suburb of Derby called Allington. I'm one of three sisters, very supportive mother, but an absent father. So my upbringing was one of great joy, if I'm being completely honest, despite the fact that if you look at the government's register of deprived areas, Allington will be right up there as one of the most deprived areas in the country. But, the environment that my mum was able to create for me and my sisters was a fantastic one. And in no way do I ever define myself as having a deprived upbringing. I absolutely believe that, some of the advantages that I got do kind of put me into a privileged position as well. So I suppose despite the humble roots in terms of where we grew up, I enjoyed a really, really good childhood.
What was the like I said, in terms of being high up there on maybe the areas of deprivation and stuff, did you feel that in terms of community? Because generally you find areas that might not be as affluent, the community can be a lot stronger. So was that something you felt as a kid growing up?
In a way, yes. I guess when you're younger, you don't see the bigger world, do you? You only know the environment, within which you live. And my close-knit group of friends, we used to meet at the bottom of our road every morning. We used to walk to school, and I guess it's worth knowing that my friendship circle was and continues to be very small. I wasn't somebody that kind of associated myself with everybody. I think I would be the classic in-betweener at school.
Which one were you then?
I won't tell you that because I think I've got traits of all of them, if I'm being honest. But I was definitely not in the popular group, and I was definitely not, fortunately, the other end of the spectrum. But yeah, I went to school in Derby, Merrill College, and that's I guess where my love affair with sport started. In many ways, because it opened my eyes to many sports that I wasn't accessing outside of school as well. And I was that typical kid that was just in every team. I was into everything. So I played on the rugby team, the football team, cricket, basketball, anything that was going, I tried to be involved with. And I was pretty much kind of the jack of all trades, master of none, but was always the first to be called upon by the PE staff when they wanted to put a team together.
I guess thinking back to school as well, I guess my own experience as well, being a sporty kid and someone who's involved in all of the teams, etc. Did you a particular bond with any PE staff or any role models in there from the school that maybe brought that out, especially like you mentioned in terms of home life? Yeah, being having like absentee father, etc. Was it, you kind of look for male role models at that time growing up?
Yeah, unbeknownst to me at the time, I guess it's only when I look back now. But yeah, there was one PE teacher in particular, and he was the teacher that introduced me to my beloved basketball for the first time as well. So I will always be eternally grateful to everything that he did to kind of get me involved in sports, and even sports that, I suppose on the face of it, I wasn't really that interested in. And I've always been a team sport person. So I also played golf growing up as well, played for Derby Golf Club, but it was the team aspect of that sport that I actually liked rather than actually the individual stroke play events. But yeah, going back to my PE teacher, he super keen. He was a rugby guy in the winter and a basketball guy in the summer. That was pretty much kind of how things went. And interestingly, when I left secondary school, it was same PE teacher that introduced me to the local men's basketball club that I joined when I was 16 that I suppose continued my my love affair with the sport.
So yeah, you mentioned basketball there, so I guess good time to dive into that. Would you say that's your kind of first passion? Because Derby basketball, Derby back then, maybe now it's not, obviously football being probably the first sport. I guess, what was the environment like, or the scene for basketball as a kid?
Yeah.
Was it like a fringe sport, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been and continues to be in many circles, I suppose, perceived as a fringe sport. Having worked in it, I know it's not. It's absolutely not. But going back, my first interaction with basketball came at primary school, actually, and I remember being in an assembly one day, and these two huge basketball players from Derby Bucks, which is what they were called back then, walk into the room. One of them is a 6'5" black American player, and we're all just looking up at this god-like, person stood in front of us talking. And I guess that's where I first got an awareness of basketball, because we sure as hell were not playing basketball at primary school, because not many primary schools do for obvious reasons when it comes to space, equipment, and teachers that maybe have the confidence to deliver the sport. But yeah, as we got through secondary school and I kind of got into the competitive side of basketball more, I joined one of the local league clubs, where the big kind of national league club at that time was Derby Storm. They played in the professional league. They subsequently folded around 2000, 2001. And then Derby Trailblazers, that is the club that I'm still involved with today as a coach, I got involved with a little bit later on down the line. And I've really got to give a nod here to, and you mentioned earlier about the PE teachers potentially taking the place of an absent father and giving support. Clarence Wiggins is absolutely a legend of Derby basketball. He unfortunately passed away a number of years ago, but it was him and he was a PE teacher at Noel Baker School, which is where the club is based as well. And he got me involved in the club for the first time, taught me everything that he knew about coaching, about life as well, because everything that he kind of taught me as relevant in life as it is, on the basketball court. And I wouldn't be the person that I am today. I don't think professionally I would be in the position that I am today if it wasn't for Clarence. So I've got to give him a big shout out.
And I'm guessing that leaving that impact, that legacy, is hugely important. Like for you, I know we're going to talk about basketball and where your career went within the sport. Is that a running theme? Basketball's always been there, even though when you left school, you didn't go straight into sport, did you? You had a different career path initially. So assuming sport always going on in the background when you were working? Or?
I want to say yes. Unfortunately, it didn't. I was that 18-year-old, 19-year-old when certain things became amenable on a Friday and Saturday evening.
Discovered drinking and clubs.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah. So yeah, I kind of fell into that life and sport drifted away, I guess, at that stage. But yeah, my professional career. So I chose not to go to university. That was my choice. I was a very good student from a GCSE perspective, mediocre at best from an A-level perspective. And I'd kind of had my fill of education by the time I got to my end of my A-levels. And I said, look, for me, I'm going to get into into working rather than going down the
What was that like
route.
at the time? What was that like at the time? I guess probably pressure from when you go into A-levels, pressure from the school, I'm assuming, or the college that you're at when you're doing your A-levels to get your UCAS application in, etc., etc. But was that a big decision to make personally and with family and stuff, or were they really supportive of that?
It was my decision. As much as I spoke to my mum about it, she was pretty much, look, you've got to do what you've got to do. Life is about making decisions. It's about making choices, and you have to stick by those choices. And I guess the decision is that I wanted to start working. I wanted to start developing myself professionally rather than, solely in an educational setting. And quite frankly, I also didn't want to rack up the debts as well of going to university. There were options for me to explore that. But I guess, working coupled with my newfound love for nightclubs and bars, kind of suited me at that particular moment in time. So I moved into finance and worked for a local company, Egg Credit Card. They were quite out there and innovative at the time. Yeah, they had some wacky adverts and they were kind of selling themselves differently and positioning themselves. And what I suppose my plan is that I would go and work there in the call center. I would maybe do a year, 2 years while I figure out what life's all about and where I want to go. And unfortunately, I say unfortunately, I shouldn't use that term, because the experiences and things I learned whilst working at Egg and all the different positions I held, again, have contributed to my career. But I ended up staying for 9 years.
So you must have been good at it then.
Well, I progressed from being a call center operative then to being a team leader. Then I worked in a number of different other departments, including insight analyst, and worked in the complaints department. Working in financial complaints is an absolute gem for anybody, the experiences that you go through. But I left Egg when I was made redundant, and this was just before the banking collapse in 2009. It was 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
And I remember the day vividly, being walked into a room and sat down with 3 people the other side, and I was handed a piece of paper over the desk. And bear in mind, I was still a young man at this time. And I turned the paper over, I looked at the figure that they were offering me for redundancy, and I shook their hands, and that was pretty much game over for my career in finance.
I mean, at that time as well, you probably thought you'd probably lucky escape, I suppose, if you got a good severance pay, and what the industry went into after that probably wouldn't have been enjoyable to be in at the time.
Absolutely. But I guess that's where I, towards the end of my career in finance was when I got back into sport. So it was a chance happening as well. There was a bulletin board at work, and there was some opportunities to get involved with local sports teams. And there was an advert, a local league basketball team, Mackworth Devils. I thought, right, great, I want to get back into it. I was very overweight by that stage, I don't mind saying. So it took some time for me I shifted 8 stone essentially once I got back into exercise and running, and because running is a big passion of mine now as well. But yeah, got back into basketball, and it was at that time when I was reintroduced to Derby Trailblazers, to Clarence Wiggins, and that's when I got into the coaching side of the sport as well.
So, I mean, we'll go into England basketball's situation and how that panned out. But I'm really interested in what you said there in terms of getting back into sport, because this is probably resonates with a lot of people at grassroots level. Getting back into sport, like you said, lost a lot of weight and stuff. But I guess first, especially for you being an ex-player, good at the sport, stepping back in, maybe not physically as able as you were before, that must have been a big challenge, I guess, with the confidence and stuff like that in terms of getting in there.
It was. Let me just bring you back. I never said I was a good player.
Well, club level player, better than most of you. I mean, you knew what you were doing, right?
Well, yeah, I was. In my head, I was LeBron James. In reality, I was James LeBron. There you go. That sums up how I played. But yeah,
no disrespect to any James LeBrons listening as well.
Well, exactly. Yeah, absolutely not. But I made a life decision, I guess. The going out all the time, the drinking, the eating, the not great food at ridiculous hours in the morning that you tend to do as well. It wasn't kind of the life that I wanted to lead. And I won't go into the turning point, because there absolutely was a turning point for me. And evidently it included a female as well that maybe I liked, but she didn't like me. And I decided, look, I needed to do something about it. So that's when I kind of got back into putting health first and started to kind of get out and run. And that was before I actually went back to the basketball court. But I do remember vividly that first session when I went back, and, I did 2 trips up and down the court, and that was pretty much me, done. But slowly but surely, yeah, over time. And it's probably worth mentioning it, I'm a ridiculously stubborn person. So when I set my mind to something, I'm going to do it. Okay. And that's evident, I guess, throughout my professional career, my coaching and everything that I guess I do. My wife would be the first person to tell you that I'm a stubborn person as well. But yeah, over time, the weight came off. I got back into playing at a decent standard. The local league team that I was part of, we were promoted to the top division in our local league, and we enjoyed a nice few years until I finally hung up the playing boots and turned to the coaching world.
At that time then, if we go back to the kind of post-redundancy and what your next steps were, obviously a little bit of a comfort blanket in terms of, luckily or fortunately, we were given severance, etc. What was your kind of mindset at that stage to think, right, what's my next step? Was it looking at finance and maybe thinking, well, I want to get out of this market because of what's this industry? And how did you get into, I guess, England boxing is the big one, England basketball? Yeah,
well, when I was made redundant, I said I was going to take a few months, because I was afforded the opportunity, I guess, to hit the pause button and I could spend some time actually thinking about what it actually is that I want to do. And it's interesting because during that time, I started to regret potentially not going down the university route, and I was, starting to kind of reflect upon some decisions that I'd made. But ultimately, what I did during that time is that I invested my time rather than just sitting around kind of maybe, searching and applying for jobs, I got involved with the basketball club as a community coach. So I was going out into primary schools and secondary schools and delivering the sport that I love, which was great from a number of different perspectives. Number one, it got me back into the kind of the coaching world. I got to work with younger kids and kind of developed my craft of being what I like to class as a glorified jester. So rather than, concentrating on the X's and O's, just being on the court, being engaging, making sure that when they leave the session that they've got smiles on their faces as the kind of the primary driver. And then the other part to this is that I was able to get into a sporting world, understand the community landscape so that I could potentially look at opportunities, to work in sport, which is exactly, what I did. I applied for a number of different positions with different NGBs, active partnerships. And then I stumbled across an opportunity with England Basketball, as it was called back then, to be their schools officer. So, an entry-level position, but to come and work on the school side of basketball. So I applied for that role and I was interviewed for it and I didn't get it. And during kind of the call, we've rejected you call, and the CEO at the time, Keith Mayer, still have a lot of time for, basically said, look, we don't feel as though you're quite right for this position, but we do have another position coming up that, given your skill set and what you've done previously, that we feel as though you would be suitable for. Now, this was to come into the NGB to help redefine and relaunch the academy environment for 16 to 19-year-olds. So this was all based around a qualification at the time that was called ACE, the Advanced Apprenticeship in Sporting Excellence, which is now called DICE, Diploma in Sporting Excellence. It's delivered across a number of different sports. But I came in right at the beginning part of basketball's journey with this program. And that's how I got my first, foot on the ladder to working within an NGB.
When you came in there, I guess you were new to it, I suppose, working with the NGB. But what did you find? What was the landscape like at that time? Was a lot of work to do in terms of, generally, anytime we talk to someone from an NGB, there's always politics to deal with and stuff like that in terms of clubs and stuff. What was it like when you first landed in the role, and how did you deal with any of those challenges?
Yeah, I guess I came in with, I was slightly blind to all of that, which is a positive. It absolutely is a positive. But England Basketball back then, very small NGB in terms of the number of staff, which was actually really good because, you're brought in to do a particular job, but you do get involved in, the membership element of the organisation. You do a little bit with talent as well, work helping out here and there, getting involved with leagues and competitions. Pretty much every aspect of the NGB that you will have an insight into or an involvement with at some stage. So it was really interesting because the role that I came in to do very quickly morphed into something bigger in terms of FE and HE. So looking at then the university side of basketball.
And I guess that's really strong as well in terms of infrastructure, right? University basketballs.
Yeah. So Bucks basketball is huge, in particular on the male side, and it's growing significantly on the female side as well. But I was able to kind of add that to my job title as well. So I kind of morphed into being kind of a schools and education manager, if you will. And then I guess to move on the conversation in terms of my career with England Basketball, we went through the rebrand from England Basketball to Basketball England, just changed the words around, nice new logo. But my role then morphed into looking at more the community side of sport. So given the fact that I was still involved with Derby Trailblazers Basketball Club, I've always had a hand in community sport. I really enjoyed this time in my sport career. So this is where I was heading up the satellite club program. So in essence, your kind of mothership club, your Derby Trailblazers, so to speak, then would work with a number of satellite clubs around a location and hopefully then feed through participants. This was all funded through Sport England. We did a fantastic job, the team that I had as well. So this was kind of my first opportunity within NGB world to lead a team as well. And yeah, we increased participation, regular weekly participation by 15,000. We had a vast number of satellite clubs that have been sustained to this day. And it was a really good time, for my career.
I'm interested. I know it's kind of education role in there as well, with obviously managing the satellite clubs, but the education side, I've always, I don't know whether this is true or not, but like most sports, most Olympic sports, particularly volunteers, officials, etc., it's always a challenge to have enough and get them trained. Basketball, referees wise, and this might just be where I was in my own career. I remember there was a really big push on kind of training and recruitment of referees for basketball. And I'm guessing you might have been behind that back then, but was that something that you kind of set out to do, to kind of build that workforce or that volunteer for?
Yeah, so I live my life by a number of different mantras, but the one that is always up there, number one, is that people change performance. Okay, so I can't credit myself with coming up with this, by the way. So my business coach, career coach, life mentor, he takes a number of different roles. Bill Heaps, I will accredit him with this because I've stolen it from him. Everything that I have done, I guess, in sport to this point is, and it's what I do in my volunteer life as well, is that, put people at the heart of everything that you do. So get to know them, understand, what their motivations are, and value them and reward them as well. And I guess this comes back to, your point there about, workforce development and being able to engage, recruit, educate, develop, and deploy, which the RED program, as it's called, I'll take no responsibility for creating that at Basketball England. It was one of my colleagues, but I was a huge advocate for that and supporting its implementation. I will say now, though, I do think there is a huge issue across sport in general in terms of a lack of officials. It's not a basketball specific issue. We have a similar issue in boxing, and I know other sports are as well. It's an aging community, and there is a lack of young officials coming through the system right now. And a lot of sports are starting to face the reality that if there isn't a significant step change in this area, there won't be enough officials to facilitate competition on a weekend in a few years' time if it keeps going the way it is. So coming back to
what do you think? I was going to say, what do you think the cause of that is, in terms of, obviously, like you said, it's a kind of aging out, and I don't know if it's a retention problem or if it's just, like you said, people are retiring from it. Attracting young people into it, is it just that it's more to do in society generally, or what would you put your finger on in terms of why it's not happening?
I think there's a myriad of issues here that need to be, I suppose, addressed and unpicked. The main ones I would suggest are, number one, it's not an attractive proposition. Generally speaking, the respect for officials isn't great. You're the good guy or girl in one sense, and then you're the bad person in another sense. There's a lot to be done here in terms of the respect levels. So I know that a lot of sports do fantastic jobs in terms of recruiting and educating a large number of officials. But if you look at the percentage of people then that take that certificate that they've gained and actually then go into active deployment, it's very small. And I guess this is where the job of NGBs is to focus on how they can support the environment, support the individuals, so that we can increase that active deployment. It only takes, in your kind of first phases of becoming a coach or an official or any kind of opportunity within sport, it takes one bad experience and then pretty much kind of your journey could be very different. And I've seen this with my own eyes, being a coach myself. The official is the first person that gets shouted at, right, when something goes wrong. So there's definitely work to be done.
No, for sure. So really want to get into the England boxing journey. So let's think. We're at England Basketball England now, and been a while. What was what drew you to the new role and new opportunity, especially made a big impact within basketball, and how difficult was that to move on?
It was incredibly difficult. I guess I came to a realization. So in the last year and a bit of my time at Basketball England, I was chief operating officer and also managing the sport through the pandemic and the return from the pandemic. The realization that I came to is that if I wanted to achieve my career ambition, which has always been to be a CEO, don't ask me why, but it's always been there and been something that I've wanted to strive to achieve. And I was having a conversation with a very high-level senior leader at Sport England, and I was talking about my ambitions. And the line that came back was, Charlie, the problem is that you're Charlie Ford, Basketball England. And I sat back and I said, I know exactly what you're saying. Pretty much I don't want to be labelled as a one-trick pony. The reason behind my success in what I was able to achieve at basketball, I didn't want people to think it was because it was as much about, my love for basketball and it being a heart thing rather than a head thing. I wanted to be able to then move into another sport and show that actually I can have just as much or bigger impact and value in another sport as well. So it was a hard decision, but I took the opportunity to apply for the head of community development role that was being vacated by Ron Tully at England Boxing. And 2 or 3 interviews later and a few tears, if I'm being honest with you as well, made the decision to leave. And I started with England Boxing in April last year. I guess
totally different sport, human culture, etc. What did you find when you first started? Was it a bit of a culture shock, eye opener?
Yeah.
Where did you always have that first 100 days thing? Where did you put your effort and resource into initially?
So as I've said to you, with my mantra being about trying to focus on the people, I spent the early phases spending a lot of time with my team. So my team is the club support officer team, of which I have nine, or had nine within that department. So I spent the initial phases traveling, meeting where we could, because COVID was still rife then.
Yeah, it would have been still, yeah.
And that was, yeah, that was difficult in itself, starting a new job and not actually meeting your work colleagues or traveling to a new place of work. So the backdrop in my office didn't change. So, we're basketball on the Friday and I'm still in the same office, but working in a different sport on the Monday. But yeah, getting to learn the nuances, the positives, but also the challenges, and really spending time investing into understanding that, I had to understand, you're not going to come across in any element of credibility when you are not deemed as a boxing person.
I was going to say, did you get that? Because that's one of the reasons you decided to move on, so you weren't seen as that. But did you get that as, oh, this is the basketball guy coming in? Did you feel that at all?
Do you know what? People may have said it behind my back, and I'm sure they did and continue to. But I didn't feel that in any way, shape, or form. And I guess it was because I invested the time into speaking with people and getting to know people, and not coming across, I guess, as somebody that's coming in with their own ideas and is trying to substantially change the culture of the sport overnight. Culture doesn't change like that, as we all know. So I took the time to listen. Yeah, there were a few comments, of course. How many world champions or how many national champions have you created? And these kind of comments. Look, I'm very thick-skinned, so I mean, I can take those kind of things. But I guess what I was able to do very quickly was identify where those quick wins were. And in tackling them head on and actually showing value straight out the gate, I think that kind of brought me, some credibility that allowed me, I guess, to move on pretty quickly and be seen as somebody that is really going to have a value for the sport.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that in community development as well, particularly in boxing, must be not easy. But you've got that the fact that a lot of boxing clubs are at the heart of the community, right? And especially deprived communities or something like that. It's a really good hook, right? To engage people. You're
completely right, 100%. This is the uniqueness of this sport. So there isn't another sport out there that is centrally placed within these kind of hard to reach deprived communities. So 62% of our clubs are based within those IMD levels 1 to 4, the indices of multiple deprivation. And interestingly and importantly, they are run by people who live in those communities. So they understand the challenges their membership faces on a day-by-day basis. And that puts them in a really unique position in relation to attracting new members, being able to break down some really deep-rooted societal issues. We've got a lot of evidence. We ran a research project through Sheffield University that has kind of really brought this to the floor in terms of its uniqueness. But there are some fantastic quotes within that really prove why boxing is able to do it. So, for example, in many cases, the boxing coach is seen as the only stable and constant within these young people's lives. And because of the relationship that they're able to develop. And I think there's a psychological element to this as well, because I'm absolutely convinced that the reason why boxing clubs are great in terms of molding opinions and changing lives is that when you walk into a boxing gym, you're met with equal part excitement and equal part fear. And that puts you in a really, really good place psychologically. And we've got so many examples of where if a boxing coach tells you to do something, you do it. And these are young people that maybe do not have that same level of respect for police officers or for parents or teachers. And this is where, again, the sport is leaned upon very heavily. And we have a lot of partnerships with pupil referral units with the police. We've got a program called Knockout Extremism, which works with the Counter-Terrorism Office, where we use boxing as a way in which to divert young people away from potentially being radicalized. The sport of boxing can do so much more beyond what you may see in terms of two boxers stepping into a ring and having a bit of a dust-up.
And yeah, I guess that's always going to be the argument as well. Anyone who's not a supporter of boxing is, yeah, obviously it's brutal sport, etc. But I would say that your job, and you might say it's different, but from an NGB, the danger of kind of parachuting in initiatives and stuff like that into not just boxing, any sport, but where they've already kind of built up the community. That's, I guess, your job is to give them all the tools they need to continue to do it and maybe make a bigger impact even.
Well, this is it. And the team that I had at the club support officer team, they see this day in, day out. I will say the boxing community is unique. and its uniqueness is its strength as much as it is its weakness in certain senses. But the work that they do is absolutely of pivotal importance and value to the community. But also there's the economic reality that, and this is the challenge, right? The challenge in boxing is that we need investment, we do need support, because, and the fantastic quote is that a lot of young people that walk into boxing clubs have already paid a very heavy price in life to get to that point. And the last thing that they want to do is take an extra pound from them.
Yeah.
So it is an economic reality that we have to lean very heavily on funding, and which is why a lot of the work that we do at England Boxing is to support our clubs in terms of funding bids, being able to kind of tap into all of these different opportunities locally, whether it be through local authorities, Sport England, active partnerships, etc. So yeah, it's
funding's been a challenge recently.
Yeah.
I know there's big. I don't know going back how far, but in terms of funding for boxing, I know it was cut recently, and now there's the new Sport England approach. Are you benefiting from that kind of more long-term approach from Sport England from a funding perspective?
Absolutely. So yeah, I won't go into the history of where we've been in terms of Sport England funding, but it's fair to say that as 4 or 5 years ago, it was a very different picture to situations where we're at right now. So that was one of the kind of jobs that I was tasked with when I came into England Boxing, was to do the review and the rewrite of our new 5-year strategy. So I, through a lot of conversations and consultation, and through extensive conversations with Sport England under their new system partner approach and uniting the movement, we are now in receipt of a significant uplift in our funding. Still not enough, although we're very appreciative, obviously, of the sport support that Sport England gives, and we would never, be the ones to turn around and say we're not being supported. But yeah, it roughly constitutes an additional 60% more funding on a yearly basis, which is going to provide us with the much needed resource to build resilience within the organisation in departments that have needed it for some time. So we're entering into a really, really positive time for the sport, and I guess, with me moving into the interim chief exec role in January, it's been a really kind of perfect time to start to pull all the plans together, because as of the 1st of April, we switched to the new strategy and to the new work that we're about to engage on.
With that new strategy as well, in terms of funding, the model, is it all kind of external funding, or is there any kind of revenue generation within that you're able to kind of implement? And I guess it's the same with all sports. So obviously there's the high end, and obviously we're talking about the amateur sport at the moment, but
yeah.
There's the pro game where a lot of money gets made on. That's what most people might see. Does any of that kind of trickle down, filter down, or is it all kind of just donations from boxers who want to put back in, or promoters who want to put back in?
I guess all of the above. And, we're exploring a number of those opportunities that you've just said there, in terms of how the professional end of the sport can obviously give back to and support the amateur end. Our largest cash injection comes from Sport England. And, we are working hard to diversify our income streams. Membership income is second to Sport England, and then behind that we have a number of smaller income streams, but still significant. So coaching courses and officiating course income is big, notwithstanding what I said earlier about officiating courses and getting lots of people through certificates, but then they're not being deployed. And then there are the other commercial elements that we are exploring as well. There's a lot of opportunity within boxing, and our hope and our goal is that we want to become less reliant on Sport England funding. Absolutely. But that's not in any way a derogatory statement in terms of the support that they give.
Definitely. So I know there's one project we'll probably touch on in terms of partnership with Coach Core, and we had Gary on the show recently. In terms of just wider future aspirations for the sport in general, or for the NGB, talks about funding, but in that strategy, what's the kind of outlook 3 to 5 years out? Where do you want the sport to be at that point?
Yeah, so I guess there's 4 key pillars to our new strategy. They all have inherent value to us as an organisation, the boxing community within each of them, but I'll pick out a few key points. And I guess the key to our strategy is making sure that each one of these 4 pillars is interlinked. There's a long kind of history. If you speak to anybody within NGB, there will be an element of maybe siloed working and maybe not optimizing a project because departments have not spoken to each other at the right time. This is just life, right? I'm not speaking out of turn here, but for example, we do a fantastic amount of work from a talent perspective, and on an international level, we do really well in boxing. Now, albeit GB boxing takes over from a world-class program perspective, but within England, we go to major European championships, and we do really well. So we have this beacon for the sport in terms of the aspirational player and talent pathway. but we haven't always reflected that properly in terms of what that can do to enable, a groundswell of participation. So the best example I can give you is that we currently have, I know you quoted a figure at the start, but we're on 23,000 registered carded members. So when I say carded members, these are boxers that compete. So right. That are, they're medically assessed. They go through everything that we need to from a due diligence perspective, and then they are obviously competing.
23,000 is that?
23,000. So, but over and above that, we have 120,000 recreational boxers. Now, have we been able to capture the motivations, the intentions, and been able to commercialize that 120,000+ recreational members in the past? No, we haven't. So there's a huge opportunity to bring that network closer to us as well, and I guess expand our membership offering. So to come back to your question, what does kind of success look like in the next 3 to 5 years? It's absolutely about broadening the opportunities for more young people to get involved with this sport. There's a huge school strategy that's going to underpin a lot of this as well, because the perception of boxing is changing. So whereas before the perception of boxing was, well, this is about one person punching another person in the face, and that there's a negative perception that it makes you more aggressive, when actually it doesn't at all. It takes away aggression. Schools now are wanting to engage with us, and I guess this is due in part to the position of sport, moreover. So Sport England's strategy about uniting the movement and tackling inequalities has kind of allowed us to shine a light on the sport in ways we've never been able to do before. So in short, we're in vogue at the moment, and we're going to make hay.
All-time high as well, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In terms of market reach and stuff like that. Obviously, the professional game, but boxing's definitely on a crest of a wave right now, isn't it?
No, absolutely.
I guess a bit of a change of tact in terms of question, a bit more personal stuff. For yourself, obviously, career's gone in different directions, obviously, yes. And like you reflected on it previously in terms of things learned. Are there any kind of business philosophies or maybe more leadership philosophies that you've kind of developed or adopted along the way?
Yeah, I love a quote. I love a cheesy tagline. I live my life in these. So you can't see it, but on my office wall, I have loads of different quotes written. Now, some of them are sports quotes because I love a Michael Jordan quote, but everything that I guess I've learned as I've transitioned my career to this point, and by the way, I'm by no means the finished article, and I've not reached the levels that I want to reach, and I will continue to kind of strive for it. But one of the sayings I like to say all the time is to stay humble and stay hungry. At no stage am I ever going to let myself believe that I'm on this ivory tower and I've made it. Absolutely not. I know where I'm from and I know where I want to be. There are a number of other kind of sporting, sayings, and I put into kind of my professional career. So whether it be at CEO level, whether it would be at kind of middle management level, I've always had a philosophy of setting non-negotiables with the teams that I work with. And they're 3 very simple things, right? So number one is that I always have this one team mentality. So it's simple. If one team has success, we all celebrate. If one team struggles, we all galvanize behind it and we make sure that they don't struggle. That it's a really simple mentality that I put into my coaching life and my professional life, but it's often avoided. I've seen it's making a big difference with the team at England Boxing now. So that's number one. Number two is that I like solutions and not problems. So I try and have a mindset with the guys that I work with. Problems happen, right? Challenges occur, but come to me with potential solutions and let's talk through solutions rather than just talking through a problem, okay? And then the third one, and I think this is because I'm a big fan of ensuring that there's a two-way pipeline for feedback within organizations or within the sports that I've worked. So it's challenge and be challenged. So really make sure that, you're in a position that, you can be a critical friend, but you're also going to be open to taking some constructive feedback on a project that you're working on. And this is massively important when it comes back to what I said about optimizing the overall outcome for England Boxing and the strategy, because you're never going to get to an optimized state within anything that you do unless you're in a mindset where you can take criticism, you can take feedback and use that constructively to move forward. So I guess the main ones, there's so many more. I've got a quote that's sat just opposite me here that says 51% is a majority. I won't tell you why that's there, but when you work in a membership organisation, that's everything.
I love that. But yeah, I guess this is probably where the challenges come with getting out of the comfort zone and looking to progress something. You can't do it the way you've always done it, right? So you've got the baggage of everything that's gone before kind of to change and move forward.
The other one that's worth touching on as well, because of, I guess, the path that I've led. So to get to a CEO position, I think there's a misconception that you have to go to university, right? And you have to have a degree in this on your or a degree in that on your CV. And the way that I like to see this is, when you want to go somewhere that you've never been before in life, you punch a postcode into your sat nav, right? And it comes up with 2 or 3 different, or maybe 4 different routes to get to this destination. And the way that I like to see it is that the quickest route mainly is the motorway route, right? That's the one that will get you to that destination quickest. And maybe that's the university route in life. Okay. So maybe that's the route if you want to get to where you want to go quickest. Having that university degree and education on your CV, could put you in an advantageous situation. But that's not to say that there's not another 2 or 3 or 4 other routes that you could take. I definitely haven't taken the slowest route. I absolutely haven't. I'm 39 years old, turned 40 this year, but let's not talk about that. But I think the route that I have taken is absolutely the longer route. It's the more scenic route. I've seen a lot of things and learned a lot of things along the way. Maybe I've had to experience some hazardous driving conditions along the way. But ultimately, if you keep going down that path, you will get to kind of your endpoint destination.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, definitely more to learn on the scenic route, and stand you in good stead when other challenges come up. You might have seen them already, so a lot to bring to the role. We mentioned earlier on about Coach COO and the partnership there. It might be a good point to kind of just dive into that a little bit, and I'm assuming that goes back into the workforce development side, or looking towards the future. What's the partnership look like, and what's the kind of the program around it?
Yeah, so it's still in its very early phases, and we're still kind of fleshing out exactly what it is going to look like. But I've got a lot of time for Gary Laybourne and Paul Thompson and some of the other guys over at Coach COO. The model that they've got and what they've been able to achieve in terms of helping and assisting young people to equip them with educational and professional skills, expertise, and to improve their future is something that resonates with England Boxing and the work that we do massively. So yeah, the initial plans are that we're going to work with Coach COO, pending a funding decision, by the way. So fingers crossed we get that across the line. But we're hopefully going to recruit a number of young people from the very communities that we work within in the sport. So these same young people that maybe use the sport to be diverted away from maybe living a life that they don't or shouldn't be living, provide them with an apprenticeship opportunity over a 14 to 15 month period where they will come and work for England Boxing directly, and we'll be able to provide them with a fantastic experience to work within sport development, work within community sport, but educate them at the same time through Coach COO and their partners' lifetime training. And at the end of this apprenticeship, be able to then provide them with a number of different opportunities that maybe they wouldn't have been afforded, without this, so that they can go on to much bigger and better things. For England Boxing, this is everything. It provides us with an opportunity overnight to diversify our workforce, be able to actually bring in a much younger workforce as well, because the young person's mindset, mentality, and thoughts often avoided within NGBs. Yes, we may have athlete voice groups or young people's groups, but these are very, I guess, few and far between. They're set up and they'll feedback on a specific subject, but actually having a younger workforce within the NGB makes us a lot more relevant to our key demographic as well. And if I'm being completely honest with you, every sport has to do more from an equality, diversity and inclusion perspective, ensuring the diversity of their workforce is better than it's been previously. So this is a marriage made in heaven, and Gary and Paul will tell you exactly the same thing as well. I do feel as though we're going to become a very key partner of Coach COO.
You mentioned the kind of the key demographic there. What would you say that is? Because I know there's some really great programs going out taking boxing to new ages or areas. Like I know there's boxing. I'm trying to think of the name now. Boxing Tots is always one that's out there with like the younger age group. What would be your key demographic?
So I guess the insight tells us that we are predominantly a younger person's sport. So in terms of age, it's kind of your 16 to 24 is where we spike in participation. We have a very diverse participant base. So we over-index and we do a really good job kind of the boxing or boxer level. The challenges within the sport is when we start to get into positions of authority, coaches, officials, workforce, it gets very white male and stale very, very quickly. And that's saying I've used in a number of environments, and it usually raises eyebrows, but it's completely, relevant, in the environment that we're working in within boxing at the moment. And don't get me wrong, I'm probably besmirching a large part of our workforce here, but the fact is we need to understand and appreciate the reasons why our workforce isn't as diverse as it should be. We do have a very male-dominated sport. This should come as no surprise to anybody. Boxing is very male-dominated at the moment, so we have specific targets and ambitions around increasing female participation as well. And then there are a number of other areas that we're going to get into, disability being a big one as well in terms of inclusion and accessibility. But yeah, we're not short of work to do in the EDI area. But coming back to the relationship with Coach Call, I do feel as though this is a pivotal step that will help to start to address that.
2 more questions from me, and I would be appreciative of your time. Do you have any kind of routines? And I wanted to see, basically, want to find out if you box yourself. But do you have any routines that you use day to day, or just to keep your kind of mental health, physical health well? I know you mentioned running, etc., but is there anything else that you use to kind of keep yourself on top form?
Yeah, I'm going to credit my mum and my wife firstly as being the two big pressure relievers. They're always there for me. They see the good, the bad, and the downright ugly as far as Charlie Ford is concerned. So I have to kind of credit them. But do I box? I don't currently. I did used to do a bit of boxing training, and I will be honest, it was the fittest I'd ever been when I did it. So I definitely need to get back into it before I get too much older. But you've already hit the nail on the head. Running for me is everything. So I run 4 times a week. And I don't run for physical fitness whatsoever. I don't look at the time on my watch. I don't go by a number on the scales. I run because it mentally puts me in a completely different place. I know the days when I don't run because that's when I have my imposter syndrome days, and when I just completely lose confidence in certain things that I'm doing. So, the mental health benefits of me getting out and running, unbelievable. Yeah,
definitely gets you in that spot, get that runner's high as well straight after get down to work. Last question for me. If you could go back to reflect on life, things we've learned, if you could go back and give yourself a piece of advice earlier in life, so maybe leaving college, starting out in your career, etc., what would you go back and tell the 20, 21-year-old Charlie?
Wow, that would be a long conversation. I suppose the key things is to, and as my dear grandma once said to me, don't sweat the small things. You can spend a lot of time in life consuming yourself, either in time or in your head, on things that are, in the grand scheme of things, insignificant. So I'd probably go back and say that first of all. I would kind of advise that life's a bit like whitewater rafting, isn't it? That's the way I like to see it. There are times when you are genuinely going to be excited. There are times when things are going to feel a bit scary. And there are going to be times when, quite frankly, you want to close your eyes, grip for dear life, and just ride it out. But I wouldn't change anything else other than that, because, quite frankly, the highs and the lows that I've been through have determined who I am today. And I wouldn't be the person that I am, or I wouldn't be on the trajectory that I am, if it wouldn't have been for those, for those situations. So I wouldn't go back and kind of warn the young me about some of the rough times that I've been through. Everything makes you who you are, right?
Brilliant. That's awesome. Thanks, Charlie. Thank you so much for giving up the time. It was a great show today. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thanks, James. No, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.